Yeah, you know what? I got no reference to intro this. No idea to even remotely know what this is like, so we're both in for a treat when we're watching this, okay? Here we go. People who got stabbed. What's the sensation like? Story 1. In the 4th grade on a Saturday, my mom walked into my room and sat down in front of me on my bed and told me that my friend's mom was unalived by their dad the day before, on Friday right after school. It was horrific. And honestly, I cried over it for weeks despite never having really even met my friend's mom before that. I only saw her twice and my friend's dad once. I remember my parents walking out of my school together, their arms around each other, after eating lunch with my friends. Now, when I think of it, I can't help but think about what would then happen a few months later. My friend's dad stabbed their mom multiple times in the neck and proceeded to try and end his life while in the middle of a fight. My friend recently told me that their parents would drag them into the fight so that they would watch it, and that last time they fought ended with my friend witnessing their dad brutally unaliving their mom. My friend's dad was found out to be mentally ill, but I'm not sure with what. I try to avoid talking about it because I don't want to by any means resurface such horrific trauma. I believe that their dad is now in some sort of facility, but I'm not quite sure. I can't help but feel horrible for them and everything they went through. What happened 4 years ago, coming up on 5 years ago in a few months, still haunts me to this day. Me and my friend were sitting beside each other in our music class that day, and I remember looking over to them and seeing the brightest smile on their face. They were so happy. But then they had to go through something so horrible just a few hours later. I remember sobbing on my floor, wondering where my friend was going to go, since their mom was gone and their dad in jail a few days after the incident. I wanted so badly to hug my friend after hearing the news. I wanted to ask if they were okay and where they were going to stay. I was so worried, but I couldn't. My friend took a week off of school, and then we had spring break for another week. I was worried to death for 2 whole weeks. We were only 10. Yeah, I could nitpick about how this isn't really about what it's like to be stabbed, but that is a very tragic story. Even if everything is all secondhand to this person, it's still brutal to hear about. I have the same questions. I wonder what happened to this kid after his parents went through all of that. Was he placed with someone else? He was that close to being 17 or 18 and considered independent. Did he have to become independent that quickly? Story 2. I don't really know if this counts as a stab, but it still hurt. So I was maybe around 4. Loved snakes. Bought books every day about them. I went to a swamp once with my parents and I wandered off a little too far when they weren't looking. We were in America, specifically Florida. We were on our first vacation to Florida, and this trip was remembered in a bad way. I wandered off somewhere and saw a snake. My 4-year-old mind said, "Hey, a snake." And I picked the poor thing up, gripping it. I didn't know too much about snake species, so I didn't know what dangers awaited me. I felt nothing at first, just a tingly feeling in my hand. Then a sharp burning sensation. It felt like acid dripping on my hand nonstop. The pain was so bad that I fell on the ground. Luckily, my parents heard me and called an ambulance. It felt like getting stabbed in the hand 80 times. I woke up in the hospital. I didn't really remember what happened. The nurse thought it was a miracle I was alive. The snake was a rattlesnake. The nearest hospital was pretty far away, due to it being a literal swamp. So the venom kicked in heavily. Now I have extreme ophidiophobia. I despise snakes. I did lots of dumb stuff when I was 4. How closely were the parents watching him? Surely they noticed his love for snakes. If they were traveling to a place that was known for snakes, you think they might have been able to pay a little bit more attention to him. Watch him so he doesn't wander off. Or maybe they were unaware of how snake-filled Florida really is. Story 3. I got stabbed in the shoulder at my old high school. She didn't even get into any trouble, despite her assaulting me for no reason and carrying scalpels with her. Anyway, I'm lucky it didn't go too far in. Maybe around 2.5 inches, because I was wearing a jumper and the blade was fairly blunt due to her cutting herself often. At first, I didn't feel anything, Then it was an insane sharp pain in my shoulder at the same time the blood started coming out. I assume the reason mine hurts a lot is because of how blunt the knife was, and it tore the skin rather than slice it. Edit. There was no reason for the attack, and she just walked up to me and stabbed me. Also, apparently, it was because I have orange hair and she hates Rangas. The reason I left the school was not from that, but rather another attack from her. I was laying down for mandatory drama class, and she walked up to me and started stomping on my head, I guess trying to end me. Fortunately, she didn't succeed. Again, she didn't get into any trouble, and in fact, I got detention because I had to have done something really bad to her to get her to do that. My parents and I contacted the principal about this, and he never got back to us. Side note, I didn't do anything to her, and she didn't say I did. She admitted to doing it because I'm a Ranga. Shame, I guess. Edit 2. I got told by some teachers not to worry about it because she probably liked me and was flirting with me. She's lesbian. I had to look up what Ranga means. Apparently it's just being a redhead. And she got attacked and stabbed in school for that? I'd always heard the word ginger being used for a redhead, but I guess it also says that Ranga is short for orangutan? Do people hate a certain color that much that they have to dehumanize someone to the point of viewing them as an animal? I gotta admit, this is the first time I've heard this word. Story 4. I wasn't stabbed, nor seriously injured, but I still wanted to share this. But when I was about 8 or 9, I was taking a bath, and my mom's shaving razor fell into the tub. I, for some reason, grabbed the razor by its blade, and it slit my thumb. It didn't hurt, though I definitely hated how it felt for my skin to be slit by the razor. The only reason I began to panic is because I knew what I had done, and always hated the sight of my own blood. So I climbed out of the bath with the water still running, and without even drying myself off, I grabbed a Band-Aid out of my kitchen. I bled through both the Band-Aids I put on my thumb, and had no choice but to tell my mom about it. She wasn't mad at me, as I expected, and had one hell of a time trying to clean out the cut. Once the adrenaline wore off, my thumb started burning and throbbing, and I began screaming and crying. Somehow, I don't have a scar. Me and my parents still laugh about that accident till this day, about 5-ish years later. Story 5. A friend of my dad got stabbed in the heart. From what my dad told me, he was a really nice guy. The way it went down was when he and his friend were both in their 20s to 30s. This happened in like 2000, and they went to a gas station for gas. They both went inside for snacks, and when they came out, they saw a guy scratching their car with something. My dad's friend was a big burly guy, so he ran over and pinned him on the car. But he didn't see he was scratching the car with a knife, and he got stabbed in the heart. I don't know for sure what happened to the knife guy, but I'm pretty sure he got socked in the mouth and ran away. So my dad helps him and called the police. They saved him, but he was not doing good mentally. A couple years after that, my dad visited, and almost as soon as he got there, his friend tried to gouge his eyes out with his thumbs. He got away fine, but hadn't contacted the guy since. I'm also pretty sure the man who stabbed him was found and arrested a while after. Story 6. Pain is way less if you never see it coming. I got stabbed by the neck of a broken bottle, luckily on my butt cheek. The pain was like a good punch since it scraped bone. Only reason I felt it, really. I wasn't gushing blood, so after a while I was wondering why I was sweating so much down there. I pulled my boxers from my leg and ripped the skin around where some blood had dried. And that was excruciating. And then I passed out from running to my mom's house. Almost made it up all the stairs, but fell back down them. Only 8 inches between each level of the flat. Then a bend and another 8, so it wasn't so bad. My scar ended up being bubbled. Best way to describe it. Like I can grab it and twist it almost like skin, but I can't feel it. I lost some feeling in my leg that I can't get back. I was about 12 to 14 at the time, and that was the first time I got stabbed. I'd rather not know it was happening because the second time was absolute hell, and a lot worse. How did the bottle get broken? Was he in a pub? He said mum, so it sounds like he was in England. If it was England, I could see someone 12 to 14 being in a pub. They wouldn't be drinking, but they were still allowed in the pub, probably. And now I want to know about the second time he got stabbed. Story 7. I was about 7, and I had just come back from my grandma's where we had Thanksgiving dinner. I was glad to be home. Went outside and ran to the trampoline, barefoot, and the next thing I know, I'm on the ground and can't stand. I didn't know what happened at first, but soon realized that I had ran onto a sharp rock and cut the entire bottom of my foot open. I was bleeding out and started yelling for my mom. She couldn't hear me, so I thought it would be a better idea to crawl up a hill. It was less like crawling and more like me just dragging my body with my hands because I couldn't move the rest of my body, despite having only been injured on my foot. Eventually, I made it to the top, knocked on the door, my mom noticed me, and as she's a nurse, she picks me up and I pass out. Note, I climbed about 60 feet up a hill with my foot bleeding out. I have never gone outside barefoot ever since that. Still got a huge scar on the bottom of my foot. Story 8. This is the perfect thread for any author to stumble upon. Also, not a stab wound, or anything even near the level of the stuff in this video, but one time I tripped on this dirt mound. This happened a lot as I tended to jump around on that mound on the daily, and I had lightly grazed my hands and knees, so I went inside to wait until it stopped stinging and I could go back to leaping distractions-free. I walked into the kitchen and my mom freaked out. She pointed out blood dripping all down my leg from a cut about a third of the way up my leg. It was winter, so the rains had probably dug up a sharp stone or two. Didn't feel a thing, even after she pointed it out. I even poked a stick in it for some reason. Look, I was stupid and curious. Didn't feel a thing. Story 9. In 3rd grade, I once managed to nearly snip off the entire tip of my thumb with safety scissors after cutting up some paper. Before, I had barely nipped it, which hurt only a little. Then, when the scissor blade went through my skin, it didn't hurt much at all. I remember doing this while only saying a simple "ow" as it happened. There was a lot of blood, though, so I went to my teacher to calmly ask for a Band-Aid, but she was out. And unfortunately, I had to walk all the way to the nurse's office to get more. My 2nd grade teacher just so happened to be in the hall, and I said hi to her, and she smiled and said hi back, only to look at my thumb in absolute horror. Had to explain to her it was just a scratch and it barely even hurt. Moral of the story? Even safety scissors aren't safe. I didn't even think that was possible. I'm trying to remember safety scissors when I was a kid. I don't think this is even possible with the stuff I had growing up. I don't think the scissors I had were even metal in any way. On the other hand, it'd be kind of a weird flex to say in a crowd or a story to introduce yourself, "Yeah, I managed to cut myself with safety scissors." Story 10. I got stabbed by someone I knew in a bar with a tiny pocket knife. You could barely call it a knife. It was basically a nail file. Anyway, I didn't feel much pain as it was in my man boobs, but I knew something was wrong when I saw a spot of blood on my shirt. I immediately passed out, like completely fainted. My other friend woke me up, and I remember genuinely arguing with him that I totally didn't faint. I was very pale. Went outside, got some air and some water, and recovered pretty quickly. I went home and held the wound together with some surgical tape, and it knit quickly. I know it's not as extreme as any of these, but I still like to tell people how I got stabbed in a bar fight and show them my half-inch scar. Story 11. I'm 14 now, born in 2008, and in 2010, my father accidentally shot himself in the heart 3 times with a nail gun. At first, he felt it. Then he legit just calmly climbed down the ladder and told his buddy, "I think I just shot myself." Of course, his buddy freaked out, though my dad was calm. They rushed to the local clinic, only to find out that they couldn't do anything about it. While there, my dad successfully pulled out the nails and said he felt fine. Just seconds after that, he passed out. He was gone for 2 minutes in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, but luckily came to. He now has the very same nails hung up as a cross in his truck's rearview mirror.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 12. Wasn't stabbed, but less than a year ago, I was on a raft attached to a boat, going about 30 miles per hour. The raft flipped, and I wound up temporarily unconscious for a few minutes. I had a life jacket on, and according to my dad, aunt, and uncle, I swam towards the boat after it flipped, but frankly, I don't remember doing that. When I get into the boat, they noticed my chin was bleeding a lot. My aunt's a medic in the army, so she checked it out. Had about a 2-inch long gash a few centimeters deep. I was very lightheaded and nauseous. Not sure how the gash got there, but it's assumed during the flip that my elbow hit my chin or something. That's gotta be weird to get injured and not know exactly how it happened. You've got the evidence there. You've got blood coming out of a place that it shouldn't come out of. But how it happened? No idea. Hopefully, this person survived that ordeal. Hope they didn't get too much of a scar from it. Story 13. So, I'm 11, still young and going through puberty. About 2 weeks ago, I was being stupid with a pen and a screwdriver. I was trying to make the cap split in half with it, and drove it across my hand. It's not really stabbing, but slashing. I was in my dad's truck, so he had hand towels. He was on the phone with someone, and I kept tapping him. He hung up and gave me a towel, told me to apply pressure, and that he can get a Band-Aid big enough when we get to his workplace. I was crying and wanted to yell as much as I could. Imagine the Crucio curse from Harry Potter. That's the pain I was feeling on my hand. Story 14. When I was younger, I was stabbed with a pencil. Yeah, I can't really remember much of it, even though I probably should. But watching this somehow brings the feelings back. I now vividly remember the feeling in my arm where I got stabbed. It was the same pain you sometimes feel when you get drawn blood, like a numbing, irritable pain, followed by a cold rush in the area. Really weird feeling in general. Didn't bleed much at all, but couldn't stop crying because of the shock. I wasn't even that scared, I just really didn't see it coming. P.S. I was in school, and my friend got mad at me. All is forgiven, though. Story 15. I got shot in the shoulder twice while trying to get my friend out of a mugging situation. It felt like running a mechanical pencil down your fingertip, just slightly harder and inside my shoulder. Only time I ever felt pain was when a stranger nearby screamed and pointed at my shoulder. It wasn't that much pain as some movies or stuff express it. It just kinda hit me. Headed to the hospital about an hour after the bullets hit. Only true damage that was done happened to my bank account. My friend was only punched harshly and had a sprained wrist, but was overall completely fine. Story 16. This happened to my friend. Altercation with one guy, and he said it felt like someone punched him in the upper back. After a bit, he realized he was having trouble breathing, and eventually collapsed. Turns out the guy he was arguing with had a friend who came up behind and stabbed him in the back. It was a small blade, but enough to puncture his lung, which collapsed pretty quickly. He survived and made a full recovery, but it's scary that he had no idea he had even been stabbed until later. Story 17. Okay, here's my experience when I was 4. I stabbed my right hand's palm with a big pin thing. I don't remember. I was playing with it and I accidentally stabbed my palm. Looked at my parents. They saw my hand, started rushing me to the sink. When I realized it was kind of bloody, I started crying. Didn't touch any bones, no pain at all. Healing was great. I got to eat ice cream, but I couldn't draw for a few days. I'm a right-handed person. Be safe. Story 18. I got stabbed with a piece of broken glass at school. It was really weird the first few seconds. It was a weird tickle sensation, like that weird belly feeling you get when you close your eyes on a swing, but in my bicep. Pain set in pretty quick and, oh my, the pain in my arm for the next couple weeks was so indescribably horrible that I swore there was still glass in my arm. I've got a nasty scar there now, though. Not gonna fade anytime soon. Story 19. A few weeks ago, I was using a razor blade. I used them a lot in the past and handled pretty sharp objects. I was using a razor blade when suddenly I hit the tip of my finger with it. Didn't feel it go through because it happened so fast. I had a giant cut on the tip of my finger, and I luckily hit only my veins, but the grossest thing was when it stopped bleeding. I could see right through the layers of my skin to the dried blood in my finger. Story 20. I have never had an experience like this before, but my brother has. You see, in my area, there are a lot of criminals, and my brother and his friend were trying to prevent a group of about 10 teenagers from stealing a bike. My brother got stabbed 5 times. He didn't even know what had happened until he heard his friend screaming. He got rushed to the hospital, and he survived because he had his heart on the right and not the left. Story 21. Not long ago, I had a dream where I was in a grocery store with a lot of people, and we were playing a game of cat and mouse. Some of us had a knife. I did. And the ones with a knife had to stab someone. And I remember stabbing someone, which made me sad. Anyway, the weird part of this dream was the physical feeling I got from stabbing someone. Like I felt it in my hand. It was disturbing. So, yeah, I promise I'm not a psycho. Story 22. I can definitely vouch for the whole not feeling any pain. On a much smaller scale, I sliced the tip of my finger wide open. I didn't even know anything happened until my friend shouted and pointed at my finger. I remember seeing the blood dripping down my hand like a leaky pipe. I didn't start feeling anything until about 30 seconds later. It seemed like the worse the wound, the longer it takes the pain to set in. Story 23. I have never been stabbed, but I'm pretty sure my blood pressure would drop and I would pass out after 5 seconds. Not from blood loss, though, just the sight of the blood and pain. Every time I get hurt, I get really close to passing out. One time I almost fell onto the floor watching my uncle get his blood drawn. Only reason I didn't was because my aunt caught me. Story 24. I know this isn't as painful as everyone else's stabbing stories, and I don't even know if this counts as stabbing, but I remember one time when I was little and I was just in my room walking around. Then I felt this stinging pain in my foot. I look at my foot and see one of those clear thumbtacks. My dad had to pull it out of my foot, and that was terrifying. Story 25. From my experience, at first you don't feel it at first, but a couple of moments your nerves start to rupture and you definitely feel it. An intense burning would be followed up. So in conclusion, it sucks, especially when the wound goes beyond your skin and reaches your nerves and muscles, simply because you won't be able to feel around that area as good. Story 26. Got stabbed, and compared to most stabbing stories, it was severely underwhelming. Dropped a fork while setting the table as a kid, and it fell in just the right way to somehow stab into my foot. Still have a scar on my toe from it, and my mom still jokes about forks being my sworn enemy. Didn't hurt until my mom pulled it out. Story 27. As someone who got stabbed on 2 different occasions, I can conclude it feels chilling. The pain comes in seconds later after the contact. It's like the sound when you fire a gun with a bullet faster than the speed of sound. Though I got stabbed with a pencil and ball pen, one on my face and one my elbows. Story 28. I was stabbed in the foot when I was around 6 or 7. I was running in the driveway when I stepped on an upright shard of glass. It wasn't a jagged shard, surprisingly smooth at the edges, but pointy. I didn't feel much until I took another step and it went in deeper. My mom cleaned the wound and bandaged it. Story 29. The experience that I had that's close to a stab was a needle went through my toe. It's true. I didn't feel any pain when the needle stabbed my toe, but when I looked at it and saw the blood coming out, that was when the pain started kicking in. For a week I walked like a penguin because of that. Story 30. I was with my brother, and one day he got stabbed by some other people around his age. It was around his hip and quite a few years ago. I asked him if it hurt many times before, and apparently it throbbed but didn't hurt too much until you realized. He said the recovery was much worse. Story 31. I feel like your body just tries its very best not to tell you immediately of how much it hurts to protect you. I wasn't stabbed or anything, but I scraped my knee really bad when I was little. I thought it was a scratch, but when I saw it, that's when the pain came.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.